hello, and howdy. I'm the rusty skeleton of your childhood playground, DeLaney. Emma, please make a goblin noise. Thank you, Emma. And welcome to Of Goths and Goblins. Now, before we begin today's episode, we feel it necessary to issue a content warning. This week's episode, we will be discussing heavy topics such as sexual and physical abuse, murder, cannibalism, and attempted suicide. If any of this bothers you, we understand if you don't wish to hear it. We hope to see you in the next episode. Without further ado, Emma, what are we going to be talking about this week?
So this week, we are going to be talking about Donald Pee Wee Gaskins. He is one of the most prolific serial killers in South Carolina. The first thing I want to say is that not a lot is actually known about Gaskins. He admitted to a lot of things that police officers just aren't sure he actually did. And a lot of the things that they have on him is like secondhand. Like someone mentioned it offhand or whatever during an interview with them. A lot of the stuff is just other people's opinions, not necessarily things that have been confirmed. But first, as you want to do with any serial killers, you want to talk about their childhood and
Started when my father left.
how they grew up. So Gaskins was born in 1939. He had a lot of step-siblings, a lot of half-siblings, and a lot of men coming in and out of his house when he was a kid. His mother would often beat him and harass him verbally, like she'd call him short or, just be very rude. Like, obviously not just short, but she was very rude and she humiliated him all the time. And his stepfather would actually beat him as well. So he really had nothing that he could do about it. And then at school, he was also beat up and harassed because he was so short. Kids are kind of awful people.
Okay, real quick. Isn't he like 5 foot?
No, I checked it and he's like 5'3".
I'm upset.
He's like 5'3", 130 pounds. He's small. Like, that was when he was grown.
I know, but like 5'3", that's not that short.
It really isn't, but kids are awful, man.
Kids are horrible. Kids are a-holes.
It's true.
But like, I'm 5'5", give or take. I'm 5'5" if we're being generous. And I know I'm short, but I'm not that short.
No, but like,
I mean, I'm also a female.
Yeah, that's true. But like, he was a little kid, and people just didn't like him. He kind of freaked people out too.
Yeah.
So they just like, we don't like you at all. But physical, you're short. Like they really stuck with that.
Yeah, it's like we found one flaw. Short.
Yes, we're gonna stick it with you your entire life and nickname you Pee Wee.
Yeah, we're gonna make sure that you don't forget it.
Exactly. But he was harassed at school and at home, so he didn't really have a place to go to relax and cool down. But about age 11, he found like this garage in the town, and he met up with these other two kids, Danny and Marsh, and he really clicked with them. They called themselves the Trouble Trio. And so he met them around age 11, and he actually dropped out of school at that same time. And so these three would like work around the shop and just,
11?
Yeah, they were 11 and they dropped out of school and they're working. Like, this was in the 40s.
Okay.
Like, this was a while ago. This was like the time period when kids would always help their family out with chores and stuff. But these Trouble Trio, Danny, Marsh, and Donald, they ran around and they would burglarize homes. They would pick up prostitutes and have sex with them
at 11?
From other towns. No, that part was around when they were 13.
At 13?
Yes, they were psychotic. They are not healthy children.
I question more so the lovely prostitutes.
Yeah, I don't really know.
I mean,
okay, they were...
get that bag, but also...
It was not good. Like, they were... Yeah, it's just too young. A lot of stuff happened to him when he was too young, and he just didn't have any control over it. But they would also rape other little boys.
Oh.
And they would blackmail them and say, I'm going to tell your family if you go to the cops about this. It didn't happen as often, but it happened quite a bit. Danny and Marsh both admitted to doing that with him later on. But the time that they were caught was actually when they were gang raping Marsh's little sister.
Oh.
Yes, it was pretty bad. But the parents found out and they tied them up and beat them until they were bloody.
Okay, listen, I'm not saying they deserved it,
But yeah, it was not great. Shortly after that, Marsh and Danny left. So Donald was all on his own, but he kept going on with what he was doing. He was burglarizing and picking up prostitutes all the time. But one time he broke into a home and a girl recognized him and she's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, he didn't say anything, I guess, because he's broken in.
Yeah.
But the girl came at him with an axe and she swung.
Emergency axe.
Exactly.
Always gotta have a bed hatchet.
But she didn't hit him. She actually lost control of the axe and he hit her in the arm and the head.
Oh.
She survived, but she was able to recognize him, and he was sent to prison for the first time.
Good for her.
But since he was a kid, he was actually sent to a reform school. This was the first time he'd actually heard his full name. Like, before this, he doesn't remember ever being called Donald. He was just Pee-wee or Shorty or...
Short ass.
Yeah, just nicknames. Just awful nicknames.
Mm-hmm.
And, people said that really, surprised him or something. And I just kind of thought that's really sad. You're kind of an awful kid, but
yeah.
That's sad. But he was 13 when he got sent to the reform school. It didn't really change how he was being treated. He was still being beat, and he was actually raped quite often.
Mm-hmm.
I think he called himself a toy one time.
Oof.
Because boys would just pass him around. They'd say, "I want that cigarette. Can I have it?" And they'd give me Pee-wee. And It was just absolutely awful. Gross.
This is a real bummer, man.
I know, I'm sorry.
No, I mean, it's fascinating, but
it is,
that's
but
just
yeah.
It's
awful.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
Oh.
But he would constantly try to escape this place because he did not like it. I mean, who would?
I was about to
Who
say,
would?
I mean...
You're right. That was a bad phrase. But he escaped when he was about 15, I think. And he married a 13-year-old girl.
40s were wild.
Yeah. He married a 13-year-old girl, but he returned back to the reform school to finish out his sentence. When he turned 18, he was released from the reform school, and he started working with an insurance company and tobacco farmers. But he didn't really like this little of money, so he actually went to the farmers and he'd say, "Hey, I'll burn your barn down so you get the insurance money and I want part of that." Yes, so he would do that every once in a while. He got a lot of money from that. But eventually one of his employer's daughters questioned him about it, and he panicked and bashed her face in with a hammer.
Oh.
She also did not die, so he hasn't killed anyone yet. But he was charged with attempted murder with a deadly weapon, and he went back to prison. In prison, he actually refused to go back to what he had to go through in the reform school, so he killed the biggest, scariest person you could find in prison. He slit his throat, and then all the other prisoners were absolutely terrified of him because they're like, "This short little guy just did that.
Mm-hmm.
What's he gonna do to me?" He got 6 months of solitary confinement because of that, and another 5 years of prison time for doing it. But he wasn't abused like he was, and he was pretty proud of himself. But that inmate, was actually his first murder. Yeah, his first murder.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations. He didn't get what he wanted from it, though. He's a serial killer. He's a psychopath. He didn't get the feeling he expected from it.
What does one usually want from murder?
I'm not sure. I haven't ever murdered someone.
You sure?
Yes, I'm sure. I'm 100% sure I haven't murdered anyone. But while he was in prison, his wife filed for divorce. And he was absolutely pissed off about this. So he escaped from prison and went after her. He didn't find her, so that's good. But the divorce was finalized, and so he married again. He's like, I want a wife. And this marriage only lasted about 2 weeks before it ended again. So yeah. But after this second marriage, he met a woman by the name of Betty Gates. And Betty and Donald went to go bail out Betty's brother from prison. Donald brought him like a little card from Betty. And apparently there was a knife in there. Yeah, he says he doesn't know about it. But, there's a freaking knife in a letter. How could you not tell?
That was just a lot of letter, man. I mean,
it's heavy,
Yeah.
But then he went back to the motel that he was staying with Betty at. And her and her supposed brother were missing.
Her supposed
brother was not her brother.
Oh.
It was her husband.
Oh!
So, yeah, it was her husband, and he just helped a prisoner escape. And so police came to the motel, and they're like, oh my gosh, what happened? Who are you? And he's like, I'm Donald Gaskins, and, he's an escaped convict.
Oh.
So they arrested him.
Yeah,
and he went back to prison, and it added 9 months onto his original sentence. So eventually, he got released. In 1961, he got released. And he joined a traveling minister. And with this, he was his driver and his assistant. Because he was, jumping from town to town, he could rob places, and then he'd move to somewhere else pretty quickly.
While traveling with a man of God.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
A year later, in about 1962, he was arrested for statutory rape of a 12-year-old girl. Before he went to prison, he escaped in a stolen car, and he went to North Carolina. This is where he married again. This is his third marriage. It was to a 17-year-old girl.
So how old is he?
He is about 30.
Huh. And he's marrying?
He's almost 30, yeah.
He's marrying a 17-year-old?
And he's marrying a 17-year-old.
I hate this guy so much.
Yeah, he's not a good person.
Obviously,
if I'm talking about him. But the girl turned him in eventually for statutory rape again.
Good for her.
Yes, good for her. And he received 6 years in prison for it. This was his third marriage, but not his last. He was married a total of 6 times, and he had 2 kids from it.
Oh,
yes.
Those numbers seem a little bit off to me for some reason. For starters, ew. This man, disgusting.
Well, he was in prison for so long.
Okay, fair enough.
The women weren't really with him because he was in prison so much. But in 1968, he got out of prison for serving his time. And he said, I am never, ever going back to prison again.
Bet.
Exactly, bet. And a year later, he's 36 now, and he killed his second time. He picked up a female hitchhiker and said, hey, you want to have sex, basically, to her. And she's like, she started laughing at him and said, no, I don't want to do that.
As one does.
As one does. And so he beat her until she was unconscious. And then he raped, sodomized, and tortured her. And then he went to a swamp and sunk her body. Yes. This was his second kill, but the first one that he liked. He enjoyed it. But throughout his life, Gaskins has said he had bothersome and aggravating feelings. When he was assaulting the female hitchhiker, he said that he had a vision into those feelings.
What?
He said he had a vision, like he knew what he needed to do now.
Oh.
Yeah, he's really creepy.
I hate this guy.
Yes. And
Take a shot every time.
Been 2 now. 2 at this point.
Please, for legal reasons, we do not condone that. Please do not die of alcohol poisoning. Take a shot of water.
Yes, hydrate.
Hydrate is important.
Okay. But in the next 6 or so years, he continued to abduct and rape and just torture and kill his victims. Most were female, but a few of the bodies they found were also young boys, which is just children are different, you know. They're children, they're innocent.
My favorite thing is how when, like, inside prisons, like, people can do, like, the worst stuff imaginable, but the second you do something to a kid, you got a price on your head.
They beat them up,
I love that. That makes me happy.
But he didn't just beat and rape them. He would also sometimes eat part of them. One lady, he cut off part of her leg and started eating it. But other times, he said that he would share with the victims. He made the victims eat their own flesh.
I mean, I love that, but I hate it.
He is absolutely disturbed.
I hate it.
But there are two separate groups that Gaskins said he killed. He said the first ones he killed were his weekend recreation. Those were the people that he found on the highway and he would murder. But then he also said there were serious murderers. And this is where he killed his friends and acquaintances. One of his victims, one of these serious murders, were actually his 15-year-old niece and her friend. He took them into the woods and he attempted to rape them. When he failed to do that, he beat them to death and buried them.
I mean, I'm not saying that's a better ending, but I just...
okay, we'll just move it. So a lot of people in the town that he lived in didn't like him. They thought he was weird and mentally disturbed. There were a few people that were friends with him, though. And one of these people was Doreen Dempsey. She was a mother of a 2-year-old named Robin and was pregnant before the time she died. She had decided to leave the town and she asked her best friend Donald to drive her to the bus stop. He actually took her to the woods, raped, sodomized, and killed her. Then he did the same thing to her 2-year-old daughter. And then he's like, I buried the two together, you know? And I'm like, Jesus Christ.
That doesn't make it better, my dude.
Yeah, no. So during this time, he worked alone. He didn't get any help. But around 1975, he killed 3 people at one time, and he needed help hiding evidence. He called up his old friend, Walter Neely, who was an ex-con. And Walter took in the van and he sold it to avoid suspicion and helped Donald, bury bodies and whatnot. But that same year, 1975, Donald was hired as a hitman. The woman was named Suzanne Kipper, and she paid him $1,500 to kill her ex-boyfriend, Silas Yates. John Powell and John Owens helped communicate between Kipper and Gaskins, and in February of 1975, a woman by the name of Diane Nellie lured Silas into the house. Gaskins then murdered Silas, and then Powell and Owens watched as he did so. Gaskins, Powell, and Owen all buried him together, so they were all in on this. Diane, the woman who lured Silas into the house, decided that I want to blackmail this man. I want money from this. So Gaskins and her agreed to $5,000 in hush-hush money, basically. But when they met up, Gaskins did not give them the money. He killed Diane and her boyfriend.
Okay, wait a minute. I'm a bit confused. So Diane is the woman who hired him?
No. Diane is the one who lured Silas into the house.
Okay.
Suzanne hired Gaskins.
Okay, I was about to say, if you're blackmailing your hitman,
that's not a good idea. No, Suzanne was out of the picture after this.
I see.
Diane is the one who blackmailed Gaskins, but he killed her and her boyfriend before she got the money and went to the police. But then another time that he killed someone was when 2 men decided to rob his mechanic shop. You know, he killed them. Obviously. And then he called Walter Neely.
His besties. He's the one who
stole
the
his bestie, the one who took the van for him.
Oh, van besties.
Yes. So then Walter bragged about killing these 2 guys that tried to break in, but then he's like, I'm not going to go to the police with this. Because, he could say it was self-defense.
Yeah.
But he's like, I'm not going to go to the police with this. I'm going to go to my personal graveyard. Will you help me bring these bodies? And Walter's like, yeah, sure, man, no problem. And so they go to the graveyard, and Walter finds out that he has killed up around 7 people.
Yeah, what was the plan with that?
I don't know.
What was Donnie thinking?
Donald wanted to brag about it, I guess.
Also, get you a friend like Walter.
Walter's got your back.
From what I saw.
For now.
He's asked no questions.
No, he has not.
Ugh.
But one of the people that Gaskins bragged about was a girl by the name of Kim Gelkins. And this girl, she was 13 years old, and she had rejected some advances from Donald. Because of this, he was angry, and he killed her. And the police were suspicious of Donald for some reason. They weren't entirely sure why. They're just like, he's weird.
He failed the vibe check.
Is not a normal person. Something's up with him. So they searched his house, and they found clothes of Kim's. And because of this, they called in Walter, Donald's best bud.
Mm-hmm.
And Walter caved immediately. And he's like, oh my gosh, I didn't do it. It wasn't me. And Walter showed the police where Gaskins' personal graveyard was. And the police found 8 bodies there. In 1976, Walter and Gaskins were charged with 8 counts of murder. In May of 1976, Gaskins was sentenced to death by electric chair.
Good.
But to avoid the death penalty, he confessed to 7 more murders.
Oh, okay. I was like, wait, to avoid it? And I remember
Yes,
that means he's got
like,
more time to process in court, right?
Yes, more time in court, and he can say, I killed more, but I'm not going to tell you where they are.
Some good old-fashioned serial killer BS.
Yeah. And then in November of 1976, the South Carolina Supreme Court ruled that the death penalty was unconstitutional. So his sentence was changed to life with 7 consecutive life sentences. But then, in 1978, the death penalty was reinstated.
Mm-hmm.
This didn't necessarily mean anything for Gaskins. They kind of just left his sentence where it was. That wasn't until he was hired to kill one of his fellow prisoners.
Why is everyone hiring this guy?
I don't know. He's a short guy. No one suspects him. He's short. No one suspects.
You heard it here first, folks. If you're short, you can commit crimes.
Exactly.
Everyone looks over you anyway.
But I don't want to say this was interesting, but this was definitely one of his more interesting kills. Because he actually created a bomb to kill this guy.
In a prison?
In a prison. He got materials to make a bomb and blow his fellow prisoner up.
How? Do we know?
No. It's like, I'm not completely sure, but
prison
the
pocket.
security was really lax there. And he got into the maintenance room and got a bunch of stuff.
Oh, that's insane.
After he killed the prisoner, he was then once again sentenced to death. And once again, he confessed to killing more people. He did confess to killing a woman by the name of Peggy Catino, but like 5 years earlier, William Pierce had already been convicted for her murder. So they didn't really investigate it that much because they kind of already sentenced someone for it. So that confession was rejected. But in the last few months of his life, Gaskin worked with a Wilton Earl on a book. It's called Final Truth. It was published 2 years before his death in 1993. It was his little autobiography. In it, he confessed to killing upwards of 100 people.
Bet.
Yeah, people are not 100% sure if it's true or not. They think he wants to be some famous person for killing all these people. But a lot of the stuff he did was so sadistic that it's possible he could have.
I mean, you're right, but also like...
And he knew stuff that he probably shouldn't have. Like, he knew their names, and he knew where they were last seen. But there was no evidence, and he didn't know where the bodies were.
Okay.
So it's kind of like maybe he saw them, but he
Yeah.
didn't kill them. But he did confess to more in that. And his book is also where he talks about his bothering feelings and his vision and how he's had to live with this his whole life. It's very creepy hearing from him because it was originally like a audio tape.
Oh.
And then someone transcribed it, and it's like,
Oh.
no, thank you.
I hate that.
Yes. On September 6, 1991, Donald Gaskins tried to slit his wrists and kill himself. He wanted to go out in his own way instead of the electric chair. A couple hours later, doctors had patched him up, and he was strapped to the chair with stitches, and he was killed. He was pronounced dead that same day, and the only other person there to watch him pass was his son, Donald Gaskins Jr.
Oh, imagine being that vain.
Yeah.
To name your child after you.
That poor kid has to live with that
Yeah.
name.
That poor kid's gotta live with that name. He watched his dad just fry.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
poor kid.
I know, I feel bad for Junior.
I hope he had a good life after that.
I hope so too. But again, no one knows how many people Gaskins killed. The authorities confirmed that he killed 13 people. 7 were women, 5 were men, and 1 was the 2-year-old. But he is just a really creepy and sadistic person that I do not ever want to meet. Well, he's dead, so I'm not going to meet him. But, oh, no.
No. I can be interested and have a delightful conversation about anyone who just, like, is murdered. Like, you just stab a dude, okay, cool. But the second you're, like, sodomizing children and...
Yeah.
Oh, I can't. I hate it.
I
hate it.
It's a really uncomfortable and disgusting
100%. So, thank you for listening to Of Goths and Goblins. Please remember to rate and review us on Apple Podcast. We have an Instagram now. Please follow us on that at Goths and Goblins, just like that. No capitalizations or spaces. Email us if you have an idea for us to talk about something at ofgothsandgoblins@gmail.com. Just like that. No spaces or capitalizations. Thank you again for listening, and remember, if you turn around and it's not behind you, it's probably in front of you.